There is some amazing fan art of fashionista Steven that shows Steven giving some expert makeovers to the other gems. Halfway through Sadie's song, I couldn't help but imagine the episode was inspired by this amazing work. Of course that's not the case, cartoon episodes are typically planned far in advance, but I still could not help but think of this artwork and that it's only a matter of time until we see these images depicted in the actual series. Sadie's Song is an episode that further continues the exploration of mother and child relationships. Rejoice everyone! I liked this episode. I thought it was good. We've known from the episode Line 3 that Sadie is embarrassed by the apparent fervor of her gun-ho mother, but now we get to see their relationship directly. Sadie's mother isn't overprotective in the way Connie's mother is, instead she is overly enthusiastic about everything that Sadie expresses even a mild interest in. Sadie's attempts to explore her interests have ended in her mother co-opting the activity and essentially removing Sadie's autonomy. Such behavior and failure of communication results in Sadie feeling suffocated and isolated by her mother. I say isolated because while the two may be spending time together, they are not one-to-one. They are occupying completely different wavelengths, and their feelings are going right past one another. Thus, no actual emotional connection with a parent is made on Sadie's part. Despite the parent being around, there's a sense of aloneness and oppression instead. Even if the parent thinks they are trying to do their best to support their child, the failure of actually understanding one another only breeds frustration. Sadie referring to her room as a bunker was some fantastic writing, as it is a reflection of how Sadie feels most at ease when she holds up in her bunker away from her mother, rather than being in the vicinity of her mother's overbearing, albeit positive, presence. I also really liked how this episode explores Steven's potentially negative attributes. His overpassionate nature ends up being completely inconsiderate, though Barbara contributing to the feedback loop was probably why Steven never noticed that Sadie wasn't happy with what was happening until she had to spell it out for him. By the way, I'm still perturbed at how in this small town of relatively few inhabitants, Steven doesn't know who is part of whose family, and they barely know him apart from his relation to Greg. Still, it does allow for the setup of a surprising joke.
Barb! I knew you delivered mail, but I didn't know you delivered Sadie.
Watching Onion's birth video had quite the effect on you, Steven. Anyway, Sadie being treated practically like an object rather than as an individual was shown phenomenally. The scene was painful to witness, and the upbeat song used in the background only amplified the sadness via juxtaposition. This scene was downright a step-by-step stripping of Sadie's autonomy. It gets my vote for the most depressing makeover scene in media. Oh, Sadie, what monstrosity have they transmorgified you into? God, why? So I've complained about the resolutions to emotional conflicts in the past couple of episodes being problematic. While this episode again contained a rather rushed spill of feelings crammed into a tiny time frame toward the end of the episode, I don't really have that much of a problem with this one. And that's because while Sadie's mom acknowledges Sadie's feelings and apologizes, it didn't feel like a conclusion to the problem like in the past episodes. Instead, it seems merely like the starting off point for the two. I often have a rough time dealing with my own mother, and we rarely see eye to eye about many things. Even when we reach a sort of quote-unquote resolution after a fight and attain a better understanding of one another, old habits die hard, and we tend to slip right back into the same bumpy routine. I may be projecting my own experiences onto this scene a bit too much, but I doubt Sadie and Barbara are going to leave this episode fundamentally changed. They have a long journey ahead of them in regards to overturning a problematic relationship built on an old and hardened foundation, and this episode merely highlighted a single "I'm sorry" in what is bound to be a countless chain of them. Basically, I don't have a problem with this resolution because I don't really see it as a resolution. Steven in drag. I think this was a great way to end the episode because it would make zero sense at that point for Sadie to still go on stage and perform an act that was never hers to begin with. It would also ignore how hard it actually is to get over stage fright and a feeling of uncertainty and unease. So it was a somewhat subversive move, but anything else would have just felt odd with how the episode had been established up to that point. Steven is an amazing performer, and it feels really refreshing to finally have a scene in a show where there is no gag about a character being in drag. So many times in media, so many times, trans individuals or people in drag are used as the butt of a joke, or portrayed as something ridiculous or unsightly. There is no gag here. This scene was amusing and tons of fun, but it was completely genuine, and Steven kills it. As for the concluding scene, the transition from Steven's performance to Steven and Sadie hanging out at the donut store is probably my favorite ending scene to any episode of Steven Universe thus far. Thanks for listening to my review, everyone, and I hope you check out my other Steven Universe or Adventure Time videos.